Yeah, so there were a group of physicists from the Department of Defense, and they had a religious background, but they were also academics. You know what I mean? They weren't just Joe Schmoes. They were, really high in academia, very educated. But they knew of accounts that were more malevolent in nature. And so what they did is they went out. It was an independent group of the government. They were part of the government, but they self-funded their own research. So what they began to do is seek out the darker aspects of this phenomenon. Not just, okay, they went and healed my dog after they cut its throat. No, right? What's really going on here? And so they reached out to various abductees. One of them was Paul Garrett. And Paul Garrett had a near-death experience. We don't have enough time, man. And he had a near-death experience.
I'd love to hear about it because it sounds so interesting. I mean, whatever time it's going to take, because I mean, like, it's important. I think it's important.
So this gets into the research of, okay, are near-death experiences UFO abductions? Are UFO
Oh my
abductions?
God,
It's very serious.
Sorry.
Are UFO abductions out-of-body experiences? What are we really needing in terms of beings when we are being abducted? Because Paul Garrett was abducted, or seemingly abducted. He had a catastrophic accident, and he said he was out of his body. And when he was out of his body, he saw things in the sky that were invisible to the human eye, right? He was seeing from like the soulish dimension. And he said he was looking around and he saw tons of people, like it was like a crowded area, massive population. But he saw these pulsating UFOs that were flying to and fro over the population. And he said from time to time, one of them would descend down over a body. The person's just walking or something, and it was pulsating. And next thing you know, an orb, a ball of light would ascend out of that person's body, and then it would go up into the ship. And so that's when Paul Garrett, it scared him to death. I mean, it changed his life. From that moment on, he was like extremely religious, very faithful to church and everything. But it put the fear, I want to, some people say it's called the fear of God, but it put something in him, because his testimony to the Collins elite was essentially, these beings are harvesting souls from us. So then the Collins elite, again, they're going to different abduction accounts and experiencers, knocking on their doors, hey, can you give us your testimony? So they find a lady named Judy Doherty, and Judy Doherty had a UFO encounter in her youth. She was riding on a dirt road in her car one day, and she said she saw a disc or some kind of silver metallic object just out of the corner of her eye. And so she slowed her car down. She turns the car off. She gets out of her car and she looks up at the ship. As soon as she does, instantaneously, in the blink of an eye, now she's no longer looking up at the ship. She's in the ship looking down at her body.
Oh my God. So it was an out-of-body experience. They took her astral.
Right. Or a near-death experience, just like Paul Garrett had, right? So this gets really, really, really troubling, but it's equally fascinating. So they keep going into this idea that these beings, and I could testify to this too, because I talk to experiencers as well. They have the ability to pull the lil part of us out of our bodies, that consciousness that exists out of the body. They could pull it out. Now, they've done this with many an abductee, tons and tons and tons of them. But what this points to, again, is that whoever, wherever, and whenever they are, it seems that they also dwell in what we would consider to be the afterlife. where they're pulling us into their dimension because
So,
they
so you're saying
themselves,
the astral or the NDE world is a form of the afterlife? Or
same thing, same thing. I'm going to go even deeper and suggest this. Well, let me back up and say this. There's an
wait, I got a
encounter beyond.
question.
Yeah.
I got a question about that because, like,
Go.
if you ever read the work of, I got really into out of body experiences for a while. I mean, I'm not a master in them by any means, and I haven't been able to travel out of body, but I tried. And if you read the work of like Robert Bruce, by the way, for example, like he talks now, I don't know if he's right or not. He talks that there would be like all these different astral worlds that he could travel to, and that people would travel to. Like, he even went as far as to say, "You're not going to believe this, Nathan." Like he said that people would go to astral hospitals and like like because they I don't know how much of this is true or what, but like that makes me think of like what is the afterlife then? Like, have you
Correct.
ever heard of this? And like, what are your thoughts? Like,
I've
sorry, I
heard
didn't
of
mean to
that.
get you off track.
No, no. Well, see, okay. Now we're getting into near-death experience research, which is deeply fascinating. But I think the evidence suggests that whoever we're dealing with they're on the other side. Um, they exist in that dimension. So if we look at near-death experiences, it's never like we all show up at the same place, and it's the same doctrines, the same religious traditions. Okay. Now there are certain aspects of these near-death experiences that are uniformal, right? I see a bright light. You know what I mean? I have a life review, and then I go into these and I meet these beings, and one person meets his uncle, the other person meets a sage, another person meets an alien. So it's kind of like a broad scope of events. Now, there is something that, and I know people don't like Lou Elizondo, whatever. But Lou Elizondo, I think he dropped a dog whistle because he said that what if the beings that we're meeting in near-death experiences are the same beings we're experiencing in abductions?
Wow.
What if that's another mask they're wearing? Here's why, and this gets even deeper and darker. But here's let's keep layering this real quick. There's one experiencer in Beyond UFOs. He had a catastrophic car accident. He's pulled out of his body. Okay, he's pulled out of his body, and he meets these beings. And these beings tell him, "Look, Doc, you have two options. You're either going to die, because they said explicitly, your doctors cannot put your body back together again. You will need our assistance if you're going to survive." They said, so here's the deal. Either you die, or we put you back in your body and heal you up, and you become our prophet. You have two choices. And so the man said, look, man, I want to survive. So he did, he promised, one day you're going to need me, I'll be there. So what this points to is the fact that whatever dimension they're operating in, it's almost like they are in the afterlife, or they're members of the afterlife. And that in many of these abductions, this is interesting too, many of these abductions occurred out of body. And the experiencer the entire time thought they were embodied. It's not until they become physical again that they realize everything I was taught out of body. Everything I was doing out of body. Even to the degree of flying these ships, they were doing this out of body. Now, you remember the constitution, the consciousness I was talking to you about, apparitional theory, where, it's not just our ghost, it's not just our apparition, it's memory, it's us, but there's a tangibility to it. People like Betty Luca, and there's a litany amount of others, were taught how to fly these ships, but they taught how to fly the thing they taught how to fly the ship was not the body. The body's still in the car, the body's still in bed. They were teaching the soul how to do this.
That's deep. That's insane. Like, it's like I said before. It's like they have like a mastery over everything that we think of what the soul is, and there's so many levels ahead of us. It seems like, right?
Yes, it's disturbing. Yeah. So what this gets to though is that how many people have they abducted that's flying their ships for them? And I know that's whatever speculation, but let's go even deeper. How many people have they taken at the moment of death? Just like that young man that was in the car accident. And how many people refused to play their game and we buried their bodies, but their souls are with these beings?
Wow. Wow, that's insane to think. That's scary to think. That's really scary to think. Because that's
Right,
like, it
because we
makes me think like,
buried them.
yeah.
This is
And
what
it
I
makes,
believe. There's no doubt the evidence, it doesn't even suggest it. The evidence screams that to us, that they're not just hatching consciousness in hybrids. They're stealing it. One lady that Dr. Karla Turner was working with, her and her husband were kind of in a dry spell in their physical relationship with each other. They weren't intimate. And during that dry spell, she was abducted. She gets inseminated. She's pregnant and goes to the husband. I mean, it's like an immaculate conception in a way. Goes to the husband and says, listen, you're not going to believe this, but they took me again. You know, in that case, they had been taking her from her youth. So they had already had established these things were occurring to her. But she told her husband that this is not a viable fetus. This child will die. I will not carry this baby full term. This lady ends up giving birth to this baby. This is nuts. The baby itself had died, but the next time she was abducted, they arrive, they bring this hybrid baby to her. And at this, the reason, okay, at the time in her life that she's telling this story to Dr. Karla Turner, and she's bawling her eyes out because there's a conflict of interest here. There's a problem with this woman's worldview, because what I'm about to tell you just shook her to her core. She said, Dr. Turner, what I will never understand is the consciousness of the baby I lost, that I knew was going to die. They told me it was going to die. The consciousness of this baby I lost was inside the hybrid that they had gave me in the abduction.
holy shit.
So they transferred the consciousness of this miscarried baby. And I say, please forgive me. I don't mean it. Hope you guys understand what I'm saying here. The child died in the womb. They intended for that to happen, not her. They caused it to happen, but they harvested the consciousness out of that and placed it in a hybrid and gave the hybrid baby to her. So we need to pay close attention to this new movement in the field that wants to romanticize rape. I know that's explicit, but we got to get down to business here. We got 5 minutes. They want to say that these things are not happening, that these are all lovers in light. And I want to suggest something else, that I have been in meetings with women. I've been in talks with show hosts who've told me behind closed doors in the green room, but before and after their shows, I have been raped by these beings. But I feel like I don't have a voice in the community, because what happens is when these people start bringing out these negative encounters, they're not getting book deals, they're not doing documentaries, and nobody will have them on a show. But this stuff is occurring to people. And I know that there, somebody laughed at me in the last show we did. This is a human rights issue. This isn't limited to oh my God, I think I understand it all, I have all the answers. No, none of us do. It's the guy that has all the answers that I ignore completely, Robert. Get the,
That's
I don't care.
that's why some people give me shit about having different guests on my show. Like, I'll just tell you guys now, I'll never stop having various guests on my show. Like, I want to cover all aspects of all the phenomena. It's like NDEs, LBEs, Anunnaki, UFO abduction, demons, everything. I want to cover it all so we can all learn together and get a better perspective on what this reality is that we live in. Simulation theory, are we in a matrix? Is stuff a hologram? Is reality illusion? That shit all interests me so much. You know what I mean? Because it's all very real,
Yeah, and these are conversations that are worth having. And I think that, and you know this as a host of a show, dude, the worst person a person wants to have on the show is the guy who says, I know everything, and you don't know anything. And that's not a good perspective to have. You know, there's things I don't know. I'll tell you that. I don't know. You know, I know that they're doing certain things, and I try to put pieces together. But I think that we have to, approach this with humility. But yeah, so we do have a problem in the field because people want to romanticize these certain events. You know, but we can't. We cannot simply overlook the fact that they're taking things from us without our permission. And I do not believe for a second that we have soul contracts with them to where they can manipulate us to the point that says, hey, listen, I'm going to take dominion over your body and do things to you that are unforgivable. And you made me do this, or you wanted me to do this in another life. I think that's another propagandist movement, right? It's another Hannibal Lecter theory where it's our fault they're doing this. It's our fault. I don't believe that at all. I want to make sure everybody understands that. And I'll shut up.
Now we move on to the regression with Barbara. Under that, I saw myself be floating up in a beam of light coming out of that dark cloud. And I just very slowly, like riding an elevator, went right up. As I got into the bottom of the cloud, there was like a big grate, like an iron gate, like at someone's yard, you know. And it was a grate there, but you went through the floor. Now, the grate appeared to be like solid metal, but yet I passed right through it. And that was puzzling to me. I don't know if I've ever talked about that part before or not. But then I'm inside a small room, and there are three funny looking little characters that I now know as Greys. And they said something to me. I heard them in my head, and of course now I'm a child. I started answering them verbally, and they very quickly said, "Don't do that. That hurts hurts us. Say nothing. Just say it in your mind, and we will hear you." So we started then communicating in English back and forth. They told me where to sit, and I sit, and I looked out the window, and I could see my grandmother's house, and we were above it. And we then began to accelerate and go above the clouds, and I saw the sun above the clouds. It was light, but never experienced an airplane or anything. I didn't really comprehend at my age what was going on, but I'm telling you what I saw. Then we kept going further and further away until it kept getting darker and darker and darker. I'm assuming, and I've shared this before, we were going into space, but we were going extremely fast. And then I could see out this window something that looked like a huge blimp, but it was metallic looking, but it was tremendous inside, and there were little portals, and I could see little tiny things that looked like in the distance like little gnats or little flies going in and out of these portals on this huge whatever it was. And I now say I think that was a mothership. And as we got closer, I saw that these little gnat looking or fly looking things were actually some type of vehicle going in different portals. So they were coming from all directions, and there were mass numbers of them coming and going. We go into one of the portals, and we sit down and we park, and I'm taken out, and then I'm taken into a room where there's right at the moment, I'm going to say there's two characters. There is a little small human looking nurse. She's wearing a nurse's gown or uniform and little nurse's cap, and she has straight burgundy colored red hair. She has funny looking lipstick and rouge. At first, I thought she was human. Standing in there with her, giving her directions or orders, was a taller figure than her, but not much taller, dressed, had real Dracula looking shaped hair, like a widow's peak hair. Also had on makeup that made him look white. He had on a blue and white jumper suit attire. He had a purple and green, dazzling in color, almost sparkled robe hanging from his shoulders. And he was giving her directions, so he was in charge. She made me, reluctantly on my part, get naked. I had no clothes. I was stood up in front of a metal, looked like sheet metal plate on the wall. And when it was activated, then it lit up and there were all kind of lines in it, flashes of light, all different kind of things going on. So this metal sheet in detail here actually turned out to look more like a TV screen once it was activated. But I'm not seeing a TV show, but I'm seeing the veins in my body. I'm seeing the shape of my brain beyond the skull. I'm seeing all kinds of things in this screen there. And later, I told Barbara, and this was in another abduction where we looked more at this, I said, it's counting every hair on my head. It's counting and recording every freckle on my body, every mole, every bump, every scar. It's imaging everything there is about me. And after that was done, then I was made climb up on a table, like it looked like a regular doctor's examination table, and I sit there for a little bit, and then finally the nurse comes over, and by the way, this nurse under the second regression, I could see her more clearly, and she or he or whatever it was actually a small gray dressed like a little human nurse to keep me from being as frightened. The larger character that I saw, instead of looking like Count Dracula, actually was a taller gray with all this garb on and this makeup to make him look human as possible.
I thought Count Dracula is interesting because what is alien abduction? It's a form of vampirism, and then this Grey chose to appear as a vampire.
Yeah, well, I didn't think of him as a vampire at that time, but I can see, you know, the characteristics there that would make you think that, and maybe that is where Count Dracula actually came from when it got installed into humanity, as witnesses that had also been through what I'm describing here to you.
And Dracula could turn into mist.
Yes, and so moving on from there, the nurse brings me in like a little cup is some green liquid, which was probably equivalent to about a third of a cup of liquid, maybe a little more. And the room is kind of dark. This is an interesting thing you may find interesting here, is there were no light fixtures anywhere. The entire place simply just was a natural illumination. It was some type of energy in the air that made it light just naturally. and everything had just a tiny bit of a blue hue to it. Okay. So there were no wall switches, there were no lamps, there were no light fixtures anywhere. The atmosphere itself simply glowed that color where you could see. She brings me this green liquid and tells me that I must drink it, and I refuse to drink it. I said, no, I want to go home. She says to me, if you want to go home and see your mother again, then you have to drink this liquid or you'll never go home again. So reluctantly, I drank it. And just as soon as I drank it, I felt like my entire insides were being eat up by an acid or fire or something. It was extreme burning sensation, like I was just burning alive. And then I remembered seeing myself cough up some of the liquid, and it dripped from my chin. And then, you know, they lay me over flat, and then I felt myself take my last breath. It all happened very quickly. There was no delay in this. It all happened after I drank that liquid, it all happened within, I would say, within seconds, 30 seconds, 45 seconds at the most. And it was over. And then I saw, and now I'm looking at this like third person because Barbara has me under hypnosis. So and she had me viewing this as an observer. So, rather than actually living it over again, she had me observing what was happening to me to help contain the fear. And she had learned that this worked better to do that, but you get the same results according to her. So first I see a shadowy, ethereal looking figure rise up out of my little body and stand up. And I'm thinking possibly the Dracula guy escorted that figure over to the side. I didn't see it again. And under hypnosis, we couldn't find it again. But I saw that figure. And then I saw rise up behind that a glowing, brilliant light came out of my body that was as brilliant as that light that pulled me up into that dark cloud. It was absolutely blinding. And it was a mass of it. And I could not find under hypnosis that it had any consciousness it may have. I felt that it had totally just a mass of love. And I told Barbara at that time, I said, it's an energy field of pure love. I said, I think it's the God spark that's in all of us. And so the next thing I know, they put a little black box on my chest and they activate this little black box. And I watched this mass I'm describing to you as the God spark being coiled into the inside of this little box. And then the little box is unplugged and they take the little box with that in it and they take it away over to the side somewhere. I'm not sure where it went from there. The next thing I know is I'm in a corridor walking down like a highway, and I could hear this drumming or beating kind of sound, like some dull machinery in the background. And as we get closer, I begin to have panic attacks. So Barbara and I had to back up. We had to reapproach this situation a little more cautiously, and Barbara had to talk to me and get me more ready to meet what was making this noise. Finally, we get there and I'm able to see it. And it is rows and rows and rows. And when I say rows, it's like you can't see the end of it down this corridor. And these are their vats or tubs. And Barbara has me look inside to see what's inside these tubs. And of course, I panic again. But finally, I'm able to look, and I see inside these tubs are little human fetuses. And I'm going to say there was 4 to 6 in each tub. And the tub was altered or manufactured in a way that the end of it had the uterus of a cow. So these fetuses were birthed like they actually birthed in a human mother through these artificial vaginas. And I watched one being birthed out of that, and then they took it away. They brought it to life. It cried. I saw it. I witnessed it, and they took it away. And
Ted,
so,
why did they use the cow uterus and not a human uterus?
Well, to use the humans, first of all, from what I understand from Linda Moulton Howe, bovines are genetically very susceptible to human blood, so they can keep these fetuses in there for psychological reasons. They birth it so that the fetus will actually experience a birth psychologically. I don't under the details of why, but that was the reason. That was what came up with me in talking to Barbara. She asked the same thing. My opinion was, since there were thousands of these things, because they're manufacturing these from all over the planet, there are mass numbers of them, so it's big business. Mm-hmm. If they had all these women fetuses, or excuse me, had all these fetuses being birthed from human bodies, I would imagine they would be. Remember these tubs, these vents, they're not human. They are products that have been manufactured. To have human women birthing these, they would have to take care of all these women. Right. That was, yeah, I think, lying within there somewhere is the real reason for this. But, as I've said to you, Stuart, and many other people, I am a witness. I'm telling you what I saw with Barbara's help, what I saw. And I'm not telling you or anybody that I know it's 100% true, because I'm just a witness. You have a car accident on the highway, and you've got 5 witnesses, and everybody's story is going to have a variation slightly, and not everybody that saw what I saw may tell the same story, but this is what Ted saw. And so that is the cloning. Now, what's the reason for the cloning? I believe the reason for the cloning is these reptilians and these grays and these mantis, and God only knows what other creatures, because I saw other indescribable creatures while I was there. They're feeding, we are farm-raised food for them. This is big business for them. And I think I'm witness to what's going on. And I think whatever took me there was ready for these truths to come out, because of the demonic nature of it all. And for us to progress in this world, we've reached a point in my opinion, where we have to start seeing the truth. As long as we believe in Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy and all these things, then we're living a lie. And as horrible as what I witnessed, it may be the truth, and we have to start looking at these possibilities in order for us to move forward as a human species. If we stay blinded by the light, we're not going to ever wake up to reality and find out why Israel is at war, why the Ukraine is at war, what's the driving force that created these scenarios in humanity where this is taking place, because there's some invisible force feeding off of the energy of it. They need that for their existence. And if we're going to wake up to that reality and change everything, then we got to know what we're fighting. And I believe that's why I've seen what I've seen. What else would
please.
you like for me to share about the cloning?
Well, that's key, and also what you've observed of the reptilians, because Barbara and I, Karla and I, and others Eve Lorgan and I have had discussions about the underground processing plants, as Barbie called them, these areas underground where the reptilians and other ETs have this large farming operation where countless humans, literally countless humans of all ages, especially children, are being harvested for their fluids, for their meat products, for their energy, et cetera, et cetera. In the discussions you had with Barbie, what did you learn about that, and how does that tie in perhaps with what you just described and what you just talked about, the farming aspect of it all?
Well, you got to understand, out there in space and perhaps under the ocean, there's some huge motherships that house numerous numbers of these species of aliens, and they're feeding on our energy. In my opinion, the light that I taught that illuminated the ship it comes off of human energy that they have siphoned off, and they know how to use mass doses of it to light the, because they don't have electricity. And then you've got and we have all these people that think these reptilians are our friends. The mantis are our friends. I've been told the mantis are the caretakers of the children that they're seeing after. But nobody stops to ask themselves, what are these creatures eating? What's their food source? And nobody wants to believe that I've witnessed mantis eating on like a buffet line where they're eating children's livers and hearts and internal organs. They're feeding on them. And I witnessed this. I saw it firsthand. And Barbara had a hard time with me when I'd see these things. It was all I could do to keep from just going absolutely crazy. I mean, it went against everything that I believed in my life. And
Yeah.
I didn't want to know these things. I truly didn't want to know it.
Ted, let me ask you, why don't they just eat the cloned bodies and not the free-range humans that are walking around?
Well, the clone bodies haven't been out grazing. They don't have any material. It's just like a newborn baby that's just been birthed. It hasn't been eating any protein. It's been living, off of the fluids inside its mother's body. They want nutrition. They want minerals. And not only that, they want the energy that our soul creates. Like they can't feel. Oh, let me tell you, one of the things I screamed at it with Barbie the first time, and I said, these people, these beings, they have no feeling. It's dead. There's no emotion. They don't care if you live or die or if you're burning alive. It doesn't matter to them at all. They have no feeling whatsoever. Until you've been in the presence of that, you don't know what demons are. You have no idea what it feels like. And it's god awful. It is. It's so frightening. And they want this energy off of us. They want our flesh that's rich in nutriments, you know. And we don't know what all they're getting there that from it that we're not aware of too. It's like our friend Janet said to me, well, fresh veal is quite delicious, well, I'm sure there is something coming out of it, or the mantis wouldn't be feeding on those babies.
Yeah, specifically children.
Specifically children. So they're getting something out of it. But I don't know the answer to all that. I just know I saw at Dulce when I was taken to the underground base there, I witnessed people being brought in small crowds, and they were in zombie land. They were like frozen on pause. And I saw and went up close to a beautiful young lady and her son. And I watched them being stripped from their clothing and rolled into the slaughterhouse. And I heard their bodies being ripped apart. Now, this has been very hard for me, people. But I'm telling you what I witnessed, and this is what I saw. I'm not going to paint you a pretty picture when I didn't see one.
Can you tell us the circumstances, what you remember of how you wound up at Dulce on that occasion, and if you'd been there more than once? Do you remember being abducted and being taken there?
I don't think that I've been there more than once, but I could have. But I'm living in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I'm living across the mesa from Kirtland Air Force Base. And night, I'm taken through I'm living in an RV. The top of the RV opens, and I can see above me, and above me is like a dark spot in the darkness. And I remember rising up, and I began to panic because I had experienced that sensation before, and I knew it was not going to be good. But I was put inside this small craft, very similar to what I've been put in before, and we went flying into and over Kirtland, and we went into a hole in the mountainside behind Kirtland Air Force Base. I could see the military buildings and military jeeps and things down below as we flew right over them. And then when we got inside this mine shaft or whatever, then all of a sudden it accelerated and we were traveling like in a tunnel at supersonic speed. I could see lights just flashing like lightning passing by me. And then it was very quick, maybe 25 seconds, 30 seconds. And then we were at Dulce. And of course, Dulce is not very far from Albuquerque. What, 30 miles, 35 miles maybe? Then, we go through this portal into like a mountainside. And then we're in like a big room. And then I'm taken out of the crowd, and I witness these things that are happening. Now, an interesting thing that amazed Barbara and Karla was that the caretakers in charge, or the workers in charge in there, as these humans were brought in these little crafts, were tall, blonde, blue-eyed men, Nordic, I would say, and they were wearing on their military green, I think they had the swastika on their arms. And that's all I could say about them, other than they were not very kind. They didn't seem to have any feeling much, if any. The passengers, the people that were being brought in, especially like this woman and her son that I told you about, they jerked them around like, of course, the people, they were like frozen. They were on pause. I don't know how to describe it, but in zombie land, but they were still breathing. They were alive, but they jerked them around. But they could have broken their arms, the way they were handling them, and they just ripped their clothes off from them, and then inside. And I told Barbara, and Barbara said, "Oh my God," she said, "I've had other abductees who have mentioned this, but nobody ever knew what this was." But I said, "I hear this very dull, ripping kind of noise." And she had me move closer into that room where I actually saw what this kind of dull, ripping noise was. And what it was is they had removed, severed the limbs from these bodies, these human bodies, and the torso was hanging on like meat hooks, and they took some type of contraption and put it around the backbone up near where the neck was in, and then they jerked it and filleted the human.